All right, everyone, glad to see you. Let me do my quick customary sound check. Make sure that people can hear me. Yep. Sorry to say, you can hear me. Although I suppose if you're here, you're willing to endure. So, my name's Anthony Horvath, the host of the Gutencast. And I have a special guest tonight. I guess they're all special, really. But a longtime friend. Boy, it's got to be close to 30 years now. So special in that sense. Really appreciate him coming on. And I see that we've got JB over here. Oh, and the Wolf Smasher. It's going to be a great episode, I can tell. If I lose audio, folks, please let me know right away. I have a backup mic here. I think there might be something goofy on the microphone, the batteries on these. I haven't been able to narrow it down. Someday I'm going to buy one of those really expensive rigs. That'll be a good day. At any rate, today we're going to be talking about a lot of things. The Renaissance man, the idea of having somebody who can really do a lot of things more or less well enough. In my mind, the Renaissance man is the guy. He's a man of learning, a man of study, but also a man of action in the sense that he's able to run his household effectively, and by that I mean like almost like as an enterprise, right? Like he's over in the barn, he's brewing beer, and over in the shed he's distilling whiskey, and over in the other shed he's got a retail shop where he's selling it, and then he hides the whiskey before the cops get there, or something like that. I'm sure that there's other things that the Renaissance man could do to run his estate, but you get the idea. But then opposed to the Renaissance man, at least for the way that we're going to frame it tonight, is the regulation man. He's the guy who says, well, 1 out of every 1,000 whiskey distillers blows himself up. So we're not going to let anybody do it unless they fill out the proper forms in triplicate and quadruple it and send it to an agency for approval, and they send it to another agency for approval. And the good news is no one blows up themselves from distillation anymore. So I guess there's that ostensible good. But we're going to compare and contrast those two mindsets, I think. I expect this conversation to go lots of different directions. So if we deviate wildly from that, please just forgive me right away. I wanted to introduce the session with our quote sponsored book, The Principles of Scientific Management by Frederick. Oh, hey, he's not supposed to be on there yet. Get rid of him. Yeah, I need a guy. Jamie, dude, you gotta stay on top of things. I just fired Jamie, in case you're wondering. I hired him back. So anyway, this book, boy, how did I discover this book? I'm not even sure anymore. I bet you it was John Taylor Gatto. I bet you anything, without knowing for absolute certainty. And the point of tonight is really we're not going to talk about this book too much or the ideas in this book a lot. But when I was thinking about the topic and thinking about what book did we publish at Gutenbook Press that was the kind of the closest to the sentiment, I finally thought about this book. This guy, Frederick Taylor, he wrote it in 1911. I have a copy right here. I wrote the foreword to this edition, by the way, and I have to say it's quite good. So I don't know how many people are going to find the book itself very interesting, but my foreword is riveting. So buy it for the foreword alone. There's links in the description. And I feel a little bit bad. I reread it, skimmed it a little bit today, yesterday, I guess. And my foreword kind of beats him up pretty good. And I feel a little bit bad about it. I feel like I owe him an apology because he could not have seen in 1911 where his ideas would go. Like many of the people of the progressive era, actually, it was the rise of the administrative state, um, the progressive era, capital P. You know, there was a lot of attempts to make the state. There was almost a utopian element to, hey, we're so smart, we have all this knowledge, our expertise is great, we've cracked the genome. They just kind of had figured that out. They had didn't discover the double helix till the 50s, but besides that, and they really thought that they had reached a level of societal sophistication that they would be able to end all wars, get rid of all the sicknesses, all the nations would get together and be able to kumbaya. And they felt this way until about 1914. And if you know about what happened right around then, you can see how things began to spiral out of control pretty badly. And ironically, all the optimism of the late 1800s was pretty well gone by 1950, I would say. Shattered, shattered on the actual ruins of the way the century turned out. But this guy, he was still pretty optimistic. And he has a quote in here in his own foreword. In the past, the man has been first. In the future, the system must be first. And I think this is the attitude that really kind of permeates a lot of what was percolating in Western civilization at the time. The idea that we've figured out the human well enough that we can create a society of humans that's going to come as close to perfection as we can get because of our special powers of mastery of science, of technique, these sorts of things. And his book was about, scientific management. He believed that you could take scientific principles, which he doesn't really define very well in his book, actually, and apply them to manufacturing and the employer-employee relationship, and you'd be able to maximize profits. You'd be able to make everyone rich. You'd be able to make the owner rich, the management rich, and the worker slowly but surely would become wealthy as well by being hyper efficient and evaluating every little step in the manufacturing process or apply it to whatever commercial enterprise it was. And it really required, there were several steps, but one of the steps was you had to know your man. You looked at the job that had to be done, and then you used science, psychological principles or profiling, whatever. He didn't use that phrase, but that's what he meant, to figure out the exact kind of person, the right kind of cog to go in that particular machine, in that particular spot. And that's what you did. And when everyone felt like they fit in perfectly with the overall system, you would have something close to utopia. Well, ironically, the people who adopted this enthusiastically were the Bolsheviks, who got rid of the owners as soon as they could and just kept the workers. And it was called Taylorism. And they ground people up in their machines more than they created utopia. But to be fair, in America, there was efficiency clubs. I mean, it was like really kind of everywhere. And my contention is, when I think about the Renaissance man and that concept or whatever that really is, there's this constant danger of history of forgetting what a human is and forgetting where he comes from or getting it wrong. If you think that we are emerged lately from pond slop over billions of years, you're going to view a person entirely different. And if you feel like you can use that person, right? I mean, for your own ends. I mean, where's the meaning and purpose of a person? Or if you're like me, you believe that we're made in the image of God, we're created special and unique. You could never look at someone um, in such a utilitarian fashion. Uh, and you couldn't look at society that way either. You couldn't see society as a machine in which we all sort of get together, by all I mean elites, to try to tinker with until finally by careful application of scientific principles we create the perfect society, as if that's a thing in itself that is worthy, instead of all the individuals. I could go on about that quite a bit. So I say this to introduce tonight's topic. Uh, I There's a lot to say about it. There's no way that we're going to be able to cover it all in the 75 minutes or whatnot. But I'm going to bring in Dr. Bernard Bull here in just a moment. But I want to say this before I do. There was this one time, and I remember it distinctly. I almost think I remember where we were sitting. There's two stories to this actually. In the first story, we were sitting in the parking lot of a high school, and I can see in my mind's eye the playing fields out there. And I said something about efficiency. This would be like 1999 maybe, and Dr. Bull shook his head. No, 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 no. We got to be careful with efficiency, Tony. That's that can be dangerous stuff, and that stuck with me. But it didn't really catch, like it stuck with me. But then fast forward to the other story. One time, this man said to me that he doesn't think he's ever said anything that persuaded me. You're wrong, Dr. Bull. You persuaded me on efficiency. You were right on. So, welcome to the program, Dr. Bernard Bull. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, good to be here.
All right. So, there's a lot of different directions we can take this from here, but why don't you just start with, well, Dr. Bull is the president of Concordia University in Nebraska. He's the author of a number of books, one of which that we publish as well. A longtime friend, as I mentioned. Um, you've got like 3 degrees, terminal degrees, 2, right? Maybe 2.
Yeah, I have a handful.
Yeah, yeah. So he's a learned fella, but he does not, like I think I'm characterizing this correctly. Um, we value the degrees, but we don't think they're the definitive answer to every question. So, all right. So, what say you? How would you like to start this off?
Sure. Well, I had suggested this topic because I knew it was one that you and I have talked about off and on over the years, and maybe I'll share a little bit about how my line of thinking began to emerge, just sort of historically. So I'm going to go back really far here for a second, and then I'll kind of zoom forward. When I was 12 years old, my dad died unexpectedly. My dad was a small businessman, kind of a meat broker, moved a lot, lived in 12 states my first 12 years. And after he died, my mom married a man, a man whose wife had died of cancer around the same time that my dad died. And it wasn't that much longer. It was like within a couple of years of my dad dying, they reconnected. They had known each other. I think they were in what was called Walther League. It was like the youth group in the Lutheran church of years ago. And they had known each other from years ago, and they connected. And this man was a farmer. Um, and he became my stepdad, my dad, from age 12 on. And and so I really lived a really interesting life. I mean, we moved a lot, and we lived in some really nice places. We weren't, I wouldn't say we were rich, but always felt like my needs were taken care of, and we lived in some nice homes and did vacations and things like that. So moving to the farm was a really interesting shift for me, and I've always been a curious person, um, and I participated in the life on the farm. I did work. I really enjoyed that work. It was meaningful for me. I mended fences. I dug post holes. I um, did things with the hogs I won't describe in detail because that might gross out some of our people here. And I'd help with feeding. I'd weed the fields. I'd do some cultivating. I never got to do planting because my rows were too crooked, and that's like the I mean, a farmer used to be judged by the straightness of his rows. Today the satellites do it all, but back then,
Yeah.
crooked rows was a sign that something was wrong with your life. So after me making the fields look like I don't know, this weaving kind of series of rows, I never got to do that task again. But anyway, a lot of different things, and it ended up detasseling corn and a lot of baled a lot of hay, various things like that. But just living on the farm and being around my dad, um, I was just intrigued. He had an eighth grade education. Never went to high school, no high school diploma, and never went to college. And yet, the house that we lived in had been burnt down years ago. When he came back from the Korean War, he took the foundation of that burned down home and cleaned it out, and he built a house on top of it. He did not go to school to learn how to be a carpenter. He did all the carpentry himself. He roofed the house. He did all the electric. He did all the plumbing. He did everything, right?
Mm.
And he'd just figure it out as he went along. And then you go out into the shed and you see the tractors and everything. I mean, if there was a problem with the car, he would fix it. The tractor, he would fix it. Um, he need to do the accounting or the taxes, take care of that. Um, there was and animals are sick. Yeah, if there was something really serious, you might call the large animal vet, but most of the time, he was doing helping deliver the calves. He was injecting the antibiotics if needed for for the animals, all of that kind of stuff. So here we have in one man with an eighth grade education, the skills of a plumber, a carpenter, a welder, a mechanic, a farmer, and all of these things. He had like 15. He had the skills to do at least 15 different trades, and he had actually developed them at a level where I'm guessing that he could have gotten a full time job in any one of those areas. He maybe had to advance his skill a bit more in order to do it. His welds might not have been as clean as someone who's doing it for 8 hours a day, for years or something like that. But he had the basics and he knew how to do it. And he knew how to do it well. And and he also had incredible relational skills, and our house was actually the local coffee shop. So come like right before sunrise or right around sunrise, the farmers and guys from the area would gather into our house. It was like our dining room. I always had to wear a shirt in the morning because I never knew who I'd be walking into the dining room with. And they would laugh and tell stories and give each other a hard time and give each other advice. And so he was a consultant as well. He was a consultant for other people.
Mhm.
And I just think about that kind of a person. And I don't know, but if there is some post-apocalyptic future, that's the kind of guy that I want in my town.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, he was on the local water board, and he understood in terms of digging wells and all of those kinds of things. So if you needed someone in a situation like that, or you're homesteading and you need to start a town from scratch, you have 20 guys like that, and you can actually build a town. You can build a whole civilization. And in full candor, you have 20 guys like me, and well, you can build a library. I mean, they,
Well,
uh,
stock it with books anyway.
that's right. That's right. I can write some of the books for the library.
Uh-huh.
And um and so growing up, I've always had a lot of a high regard for the ability to teach yourself things, for agency, for ownership, for self-directed learning, for the capacity to do those kinds of things. And that's part of why I thought it'd be fun for us to maybe have this conversation. I'd mentioned to you before we started that there's this quote that a lot of people reference, and they use it almost in a derogatory way sometimes, of jack of all trades, master of none. And my understanding is that when it first came out in maybe the 17th century, that was actually considered to be a compliment. it was a way of affirming someone as a generalist. And then
Mhm.
jack of all trades, master of none later kind of morphed into a kind of criticism, like, yeah, they're not great at anything. And then I think in order to correct that, even later, maybe it was like 19th century, the quote was sort of expanded to clarify its initial intent, which was jack of all trades, master of none, but often better than master of one.
Mhm.
um, right? And so that just kind of intrigues me. I do see a lot of merit and value, and I think also one thing that's really rewarding is when you learn a new skill like that, it builds some confidence, and it gives you a sense of agency and ownership, like you have some influence over the things that happen to you. Um, and so that's why I thought it might be fun to talk about. I know we can take this a lot of different directions, but that was the
Yeah.
impetus was actually a really personal one. Was this experience, and I do see that we've become, hyper professionalized today, and I'm not opposed to that. There are benefits and downsides to it. But the regulations over time are also a part that I think you and I will get into.
Yeah.
That can be pretty problematic because I mean, think about the fact that someone like my dad in certain towns, he could be fined for changing an electrical outlet.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep.
Um, and that seems, and I understand it's a safety precaution, and it's to protect the town from people like me who would replace the outlet and burn the
Right.
house down. But um, but that there's something problematic about it when you actually create laws and regulations and fines and other things like that that almost deter people from having, multiple skills and really using them. And
Yeah.
also just think about the fact that my dad, all of those skills, had he had to outsource all of those, he would have gone bankrupt. I mean, he
Right.
wouldn't have been
Right.
able to run a farm, if he had. That would have been tens of thousands of dollars to hire out all those things to
Yeah.
get done in a given week.
Necessity is the mother of invention, as they say.
Sure.
Yeah. So like the one of the if we look at like the 20th century, like the trajectory of it, and I think both you and I have similar thoughts, maybe from different directions, as to like how we've come to where we're at with, but where we're at is like everything's sort of geared towards you take a kid, he's in school, they find out where he tests, how well he tests, and what things he tests, and then somebody or a computer spits out, oh, you're going to be a great whatever it is, and then the rest of his curriculum or his the guidance counselor, right, looks at those scores and helps them pick courses that are related to that, and then they get to college and it's just a continuation of that. And the truth is just because you're good at something doesn't mean that you're made for that thing. But there's a certain kind of person that I think relishes the idea of looking at 1,000 people and deciding you will be a plumber, you will be a mathematician, you will, I don't know what you'll do, but we'll find something for you. Um, and it's like and that person is in charge, like is kind of the problem. Education, at least in principle, well, I don't, maybe I shouldn't say this because you know all about education and I'm a pure hack, but it seems to me, and this is what we'll say, is that prior to John Dewey, is education was sort of a liberal arts kind of. We're gonna give people a fairly basic thing, and then they'll run with it how they choose. And then it got switched around to they choose. You know, um, we do have some people watching, and a person commented, "Mass production applied to education." Um, Yeah. So, but what I was thinking in this context is like there's dangers to this. Like, you have to know, you practically have to be God in order to know if you're really doing well for that person and society. And I'll give this example. Um, when I was in high school in like 1992 or whatever, I remember them doing the guidance counselor coming in and talking about, what careers you might want to go into, what was hot or whatever. And you know what? Computer engineering was not on the list. you know, there was no sense whatsoever that the internet would be a thing. Like they had no idea, right? Um, it was completely outside of their ken. And about 3 years ago, I was in my kid's school, and I found that they had a bin of books that they were giving away, and in that was a 2 cassette tape series about almost from like the 1992 era about what careers, and it was about what if you wanted to go into computers. This is 92. Now I didn't watch the videos because it was VHS, and who has a VHS player anymore that works? I should say I've got like five, but I don't think any of them work. But I read the manual, and the manual says this is like 1992. It says go into computers if you want to be like a statistician or work with numbers, but for the most part, there's no future in computers. This is like so. There's these people. If you can imagine them, they're the ones deciding what you'll do with your life, and there's no way they could possibly know what the future is going to be. And so I think that's like one of the things that hamstrings this entire mindset that says we're going to create a scheme for millions of people and shove people into it. You have no idea what 1 year or 5 years or 10 years is going to look like. Absolutely none. And it's possible to not just ill-equip people, but to mal-equip people for that whatever that future is.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and that's a challenge that we've had for quite a long time in different education systems, even in Europe and other places. And the placement, the idea of placing people, even at early ages, and the like. Uh, I mean, this takes us a whole nother strand if we want to go that route of sort of the way the education system contributes to this. But I actually think that the education system followed
Hmm.
uh, some larger social developments and initiatives. I mean, you mentioned the book, The Principles of Scientific Management. I mean, it's some of those kinds of societal changes, urbanization, industrial revolution, some of those other kinds of larger scale kind of social developments that that led to the thinking of people like Dewey and others, and how they sought to, or Pestalozzi and some of these others that sort of reimagined the educational models, and they looked for these kind of mass productions kind of approaches, like Pestalozzi showing how you could optimize teaching and learning in a class of 150 and for the greatest possible outcomes and so
Hmm.
forth. And very much workforce readiness kind of response that grew out of some larger cultural pieces. So the part that intrigues me kind of goes back to that pre-education phase, because I think in some ways education followed quite a bit. I don't think the educational theorists were the ones who made this stuff happen.
Oh, you're gonna just leave it there?
Well, I just want to see if I give you a chance to react. I didn't know.
No, no, keep going. That's fine. Keep going.
Yeah. So, there's a great book that I mentioned to you. We kind of talked a little bit before we started. That's called Systems of Professions by a guy named Abbott, and it's from the 80s. And it's a book that sort of talks about the history of professions as we know them today, and how different kinds of trades and professions and would fought over who had the authority to tackle certain problems in society. And you go, and a lot of this happens, in the mid, like 1840s to 1890s. We see a lot of that developing, and and that's where a lot of the professional associations emerged. American Medical Association, Professional Association for Accounting, the idea of raising standards for law. Previously, you could be sort of a self-taught lawyer, and then even after the bar, there were a lot of states where you could pass the bar without going to law school. Now, I think
Right.
there's still actually only, like, I think there are just 3 states, about 2 or 3 states that allow you to take the bar without going to law school.
Yeah.
But so the idea was, hey, if you have the skill, go for it.
Right.
But just this whole development, this idea, and it was done under, I think there was a respectable rationale for this. We want to protect people. We want to increase the quality of service in these different areas, especially in areas like healthcare and the like.
Hmm.
Um, but in the process, it also did a lot of almost excluding people who maybe had the skill to do certain jobs, and narrowing the pathways to demonstrate proficiency and qualification that have happened. You could, in a lot of, there were a lot of apprenticeship opportunities that existed for people in the past, and that's part of what I think is a real concern. In fact, I hope to have a future book that talks about this concept of credentialism, which was written about a lot in the 1970s, is a real concern that I have in society today. And to illustrate what's meant by credentialism is it's it's the use of credentials beyond the point of their actual merit or value, to the point
Hmm.
that it actually starts to hurt people and restrict them from opportunities unnecessarily. So I'll give you an example. Say you're an employer and you're in a city and you have a new job, and you just post that a minimum requirement is a bachelor's degree in a relevant field. But if I go in, and I've actually done this as a consultant, and I go in and I audit the skills and knowledge that are necessary to do that job, a bachelor's degree is actually not necessary to do that job.
Right.
So what they did is they just cut out the entire workforce that does not have a bachelor's degree in a related field, or maybe doesn't have a bachelor's degree altogether. And that employer could have found an incredible person who maybe needed a little bit of coaching and mentoring, but they had all the key prerequisite skills. They could have stepped in, made a great living for themselves and for their family, made a great career out of it, but it would have been really loyal to that company and for years to come. And yet this sort of emergence of credentialism came out. And you ask the company, and they say, well, it's an easy way to vet. It's an easy way to vet out people because um, we're going to get 1,000 applicants, and we don't have to weed through all of them. So we just put bachelor's degree required, and we have this small group. And yet again, it's the system over the individual. You've just ruled out some amazing people and some amazing talent,
Right.
and even including, think about the situation. This is an extreme one, but you just ruled out the person who is 6 credits short of a bachelor's degree, and they left college to go care for their dying mother, and they demonstrated the kind of character and loyalty that anyone would want in their organization
Yeah.
in doing that. But then they didn't have enough money after the mom passed away to go back and finish things up for 6 credits. Are we really saying that the person with 6 credits less than the bachelor's degree is less qualified than the person who just stuck around for an additional, 8 weeks or something like that? Like, those are the kinds of things that I think are problematic in the system that we've developed today. And by the way, this is coming from a university president, and people are saying, "Wait a second, aren't you talking against your own, the system that the hand you're biting the hand that feeds you?" And no, I don't. I actually think that universities are incredible and powerful places. It's just they shouldn't be the gatekeepers of access to all of these opportunities, and they should be rich communities of deep and varied learning, and they should be centered around a culture of learning. And yes, they happen to get credentials and degrees along the way, but it's the actual authentic learning that really matters.
So up until about 1940 or so, maybe a little bit earlier than that, even Supreme Court justices often were pulled from fields completely outside of the law, and they did just fine. They were smart people. It turns out there's smart people in the law outside of the field of the law. So I think so there's a benefit to the specialization in a different kind of ways. We want the heart surgeon to have specialization, for example, um, or at least we want them to be well trained in heart surgery, right? Um, but for a lot of things that are out there, I feel like the the structures that are set up are really designed to insulate the professionals from competition, right? So you have to go through all of these steps if you want to be in this field. And we have managed to get, usually there's the government gets involved at some point and ratifies and validates that and says we're only going to allow it to be legal that your professional organization is allowed to do these kinds of things. So, and it basically means then that you have these little microcultures where they're just protecting themselves from other voices. And if you want to go into that field, you better be prepared to to pay your dues in that field, which is great, I suppose, until like something like COVID comes along, and like you could have in the past maybe moved to find a job that's within your degrees, but now everyone's stuck in their homes with their specialized degrees, and they can't move with their feet to find a new job, and then they become wards of the state.
Yeah. Right. And even, as someone who values higher education, I think there's great merit in it. I do believe that there's something really rich and meaningful about someone that's developing multiple skills and abilities. That, I mean, I don't care what major you are, but I would encourage everyone to learn to play an instrument, even if badly.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's real value in one's life. I'm a big fan of music that's hyper local. For example, I call it front porch music, local coffee shop kind of music, not the stuff that ever makes it to the and makes it even to the internet, or makes it on some kind of recording through some kind of recording label or something like that. Like, music is a really powerful way of transmitting culture, of drawing people together, building a sense of community. It's a wholesome form of entertainment and enjoying life together with others. Um, so I think about that. I'm grateful that music is actually one of those areas where there aren't as many gatekeepers, at least for enjoying it in your life. If you want to be part of the industry, there are gatekeepers, and there are
Right.
different kinds of systems there. But learning to do something with your hands, learning to build something, learning to learning to solve some problems and fix some things on your own. Um, just developing, I see some real value in that. um Maybe it's hunting. People love hunting. I see some real value in learning to hunt and actually kill and care for, kill and clean the food and then prepare it and bring it to your table. There's something that you learn about that's different from just going to the grocery store and buying
Yeah.
your food.
Well,
We try to buy all our meat from local farmers, actually, but and I like to be more connected to the source.
I'm just thinking of the editing job I could do with that clip. Everyone should be able to kill and clip.
Right. But it does concern me sometimes when we I see some paths where we kind of raise the standards and we almost urge people just stay focused and
Yeah.
just do this one thing. And
Right.
yeah, it's great to go really deep in an area. That there's real wisdom in learning what it's like to spend years and years honing your skill and expertise in one area. That's an important lesson to learn. That some of the most important lessons require 5 or 10 years
Yeah.
of devoted study and focus. And equally, it's also really valuable to be a perpetual novice in something and learn what it's like to be new, what it's like to be new at learning something. Uh, I have sitting next to me a harmonica that I'm going to be experimenting with and learning. And just because I never want to forget what it's like to be a novice at something. And there's merit in having and stretching our minds to look at things from multiple disciplines and multiple trades. I think about how does a plumber look at life differently than a carpenter? I don't actually know the answer to that, but there probably are some differences. That the way you kind of train your mind,
Mm-hmm.
and what happens if you actually learn to do multiple things like
Right.
that, and
Right.
does it give you multiple perspectives? The same way in academics we talk about disciplines, and even the idea of an academic discipline was created at some point in history. They didn't always exist. An academic discipline is a guild of people focused around a certain set of questions, a certain common vocabulary, certain set of kind of ethical standards, and so forth. And there's some real value in investing in one discipline and really getting to see what it's like to be part of that disciplinary guild and know how they think and how they solve problems. And then there's some real value in maybe looking and learning about other disciplines so you can do what's sometimes called interdisciplinary problem solving. So you have a problem before you, and if you only can think about it like a biologist, you're going to try to solve it like a biologist. But
Right.
maybe it requires a poet to look at it with fresh eyes.
Right.
Um, and so that's where I see the value in that kind of. I'm not a big fan of the phrase "well-rounded," but the idea of a Renaissance mindset or perspective. And by the way, I'm also a big fan of something that people don't talk about very much in academics, which is called adisciplinarity, which is someone who just chooses to look at the world and problems beyond the formal boundaries and definitions of any given discipline. They
Mm-hmm.
just they sort of it's more of a sort of self-taught approach. And the reason I like that is because I'm a person who studies innovation studies. That's one of my areas of interest, and novices are much better at seeing opportunities sometimes than a person who's been immersed in a given problem. That's true sometimes. Sometimes it's not. I mean, it varies.
So I've had a number of thoughts come to my mind as you were talking. Um, but so these are not necessarily in order or whatnot, but like one example of that comes to my mind is a certain professor that I had in college, who was fabulous, was just an amazing teacher, Rasmussen. But and I don't know all the backstory a whole lot, but like my understanding is that he was disinvited from teaching because he didn't have his doctorate. So if that's even if that's not true in that case, I'm sure that's true in other cases. So where you have somebody who's like an extremely competent person in his subject area, but also a masterful communicator of the ideas, and yet the university setting can't have him because he doesn't have the credential, which
Yeah,
is
I didn't know that. I didn't
ridiculous.
know that he was told. I had him in class. So, but I'm a year or two older than you, so maybe that happened later. I'm not sure.
Well, I was a young whippersnapper at the time, going on rumors. That was my understanding that I drew from that all those years. I want to give another.
Oh, hey, very just for
Yeah.
those who just to so uh, Wayne Rasmussen has been called home. He's
Oh, I didn't
with
know that.
his Lord. He passed away a number of years ago, but he was my basketball coach. I played basketball. I mean, he was a brilliant coach. He taught Latin. He taught Greek. He taught a class called the History of Baseball. He's a big baseball fan. Loved baseball. He was a voracious reader across multiple disciplines. He was an example of a person that, and I don't know, maybe he wasn't great with his hands or other things like that. I'm not sure if he had other trades or something like that, but he is an example, the kind of thing that I see some real merit in people that allow themselves to explore a little bit. And he had a lot to offer. He was a great mentor for me, and several of his book recommendations were books that were pretty transformational for me.
Yeah. So another example, something that came to my mind is how for years I have my ham radio license, and for years you couldn't get your ham radio license unless you learned Morse code. But nobody wanted to learn Morse code, and so like it was just dying out, right? There, and then eventually all those old coots said, okay, let's lose the Morse code, or we're not going to have any more ham radio operators anymore. And even now they have a test for it, where I've kind of looked at it and like you can't see, but I have all my ham radio stuff kind of around me here. You know, you don't need like 90% of that stuff to do the ham radio stuff. But I've talked to some of them about, well, why are we doing this? And they said, well, I had to do it, right? And that's the reason. And even if there's like no ham radio operators left, those kinds of people, they're still going to require it because they had to do it. So one more anecdote, and then I'll let you take it over again. So I live in a rural area. This might resonate with you, um, well, from what you said about the farmer type stuff. So um, I'm a 10-year veteran of the volunteer fire department here, and it's if you did not have just your like ordinary people join that, your house would burn down and you'd just be out of luck, right? You've got farmers, you've got uh, just well, ordinary people, right? A lot of them are farmers, but they just, the call goes out, they drop what they're doing. And are they trained like a professional in one of the big cities? No, but it's actually not rocket science. Actually, it's not rocket science. And the irony is that in the state of Wisconsin, the government is continually increasing the training regulation requirements, even for the volunteer departments. And I know people who have been interested in joining the fire department who said, I don't mind going on calls, but I don't have the kind of life and time to take 2 months, you know, 2 days out of the week, 2 evenings, and go do that. I just don't have it. And so you have understaffing because you've got people who are like, well, and obviously you can see the argument, right? The argument would be proper training and fire, putting out a fire. I mean, who could? There's no dispute that that's valuable. I'm not disputing that that's valuable, but between having someone who has not the proper training and nobody at all, I'm going to go with the guy who, has not the proper training but shows up, you know? And
Yeah.
I can see that through in lots of places in society too, where you've got people who are the gatekeepers, I believe is the phrase that you use. And, we've just created these silos and people get crammed into them. And it's because of the way our society is built with credentialism or whatever. You can't get out of your silo unless you go pay your dues with 3 or 4 years of apprenticeship training, whatever it is. And that's fine if you've got an economy that is fluid enough to handle that. But if you don't, then you've got a lot of people who are just going to be suffering, and you'll never know their names. They're out there, but you'll never find them. I don't think that's been studied. The people who are think that they're the managers of our society, who want to tweak it so it's perfect, I don't think are even aware of the people who, not to get too political, but like when they put the coal miners out of work and Biden just said, well, learn to code. I don't know if you remember that, basically. And there are people who couldn't do that, right? And now they're just forgotten. Like, where are they? They've gone on with their life. They can't learn how to code. They're 60 years old. They just lost the job that they've had for all these years. Now multiply that across multiple occupations. It's a recipe for disaster, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I do see some hope though. I think we haven't. I don't believe we've entirely lost the idea of a Renaissance person or a person that has a high level of agency and ownership and confidence and competence in learning a variety of new skills and teaching themselves things. I mean, we do have some things today that I think are good. I'm inspired. I have high regard for farmers because even though there's a lot that's changed in for being a farmer, and it's harder to be a kind of small scale farmer today, and we have more kind of corporate farms and the like, but there's still within farm communities and among you find a lot of people that have multiple skills, and they they probably, these are people that are that are volunteering in their local for the fire department, and they're helping out with a variety of things. They have building skills and welding skills, and all sorts of other things like that too. So I've a lot of hope in that. There's this It's interesting that we've had such an intrigue in the last 10 or 20 years around homesteading.
Hmm.
Like, there are even shows and documentaries and these competition shows around homesteading, because part of it may be because there's an intrigue with those who still have the ability to just kind of figure things out. Um, we have the maker movement that's really developed in the last 10 or 15 years with these maker events of it's a kind of DIY people.
Okay.
Um,
Huh.
so people that develop skills in literally weaving baskets. I know people used to use that as like the joke about taking basket
Uh-huh.
weaving in college, but man, that's a pretty impressive skill when you
Yeah.
see a well woven basket.
Okay. Yes, I admit that I could not weave a basket and have it look good, but I do not think I should get a 4-year degree in it. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
well, I'm not sure you get a whole degree in it, but of course, hey, why not? Yeah, but we don't offer courses in basket weaving at my university, I don't
That's
think.
good to
But
know.
um, I'm not sure. Maybe we do. I wouldn't be opposed if it were an art class. You could
Hmm.
justify it, I'm sure. But even the other one is YouTube. So there was an instance. This might seem way out there, but there was an instance maybe 3 years ago. There was a news story about a kid whose parent was choking, um, and the kid went on YouTube and figured out what to do and
Hmm.
imitated what was in the video and saved his parents' life. I don't know if his mom or dad, or and there've
Without a
been
license, he did that
what's
without
that?
a license.
I know exactly. Wasn't even a
Should have got a
license to
permit.
do. Um, and we do see YouTube University, not a real
Yeah.
university, but it is a real thing. And there are I actually use YouTube regularly to learn how to do things when I'm playing guitar and I'm trying to figure out some new riff or something else. I'll go on there and find an example to learn from. When I'm trying to fix something in my house, I
Hmm.
go there. So I do think that I'm hopeful about this, that this idea of being self-directed and self-taught isn't being lost in all of this professionalism.
It's interesting because in the 1990s, the late 1990s, the internet was the Wild West, as they said, and it had to be brought under control, right? Which they sort of did. And yet, here we are now, there's like a rebellion against that. And human ingenuity is such that the gatekeepers, even like of the internet and of knowledge, they every time they come up with something, some way to restrict it, innovators just find a way to get around it anyway. And so it's there's like the genie's out of the bottle in this sense, and I think there's a lot of people who, because of that, or in that spirit, I think, I'm trying to think of the best way to say that, like they're never going to be bamboozled by the idea that, yeah, all right, you have a certificate on the wall, you're smarter than me, like that's not going to cut it, I think, anymore. Maybe it worked in the 70s, but I don't see it working now. So that, and I think that's ultimately a good thing. There's obviously downsides to it, but ultimately I think it's a good thing, because I think you need to have checks and balances in everything. Like, if you can imagine it, I'm a libertarian, kind of. I think you need to have checks and balances, and I think that's a good check and balance.
Yeah, and just to to clarify too, I do see merit in professionalism. I mean, it has its place. It has created more safety checks in some places, and some accountability systems. I think I want a pilot that has been tested and verify, that we've validated that. And as you noted before, a surgeon, I definitely want to know that the person picking up the scalpel knows what they're doing, and that I have some kind of assurance that they're competent in doing this.
Hmm.
And yet, I think part of it is what happens when it's been overextended, when we have regulations in areas where there's not a major safety concern.
Right.
Um, and also, maybe we've created regulations that are really relevant and appropriate for an urban setting, but when you live in a rural setting, the same laws maybe shouldn't apply, shouldn't be as relevant. It's just not consistent, sort of the life in that smaller town environment.
Right.
It can create a kind of an elitism. It can exclude people unnecessarily, and also it can create an over dependency where I actually just don't have the skills to change my own tire in a crisis or something like that. I mean, the, this idea of over dependency. I know that I have much greater dependency on people and things than my dad did. I mean, I don't like messing with electric. I just worry that I'm going to do something wrong. But I've done, I've replaced toilets and things like that in my house. So I've figured
Hmm.
out how to do some of that. My wife and I have remodeled homes. My wife's way better at some of the stuff than I am, but I can do the more manual labor part. Um,
Maybe
but I
we need to
mean, when I
bring
get my
her
car,
onto the show.
that's
Why
right.
you move to the side, bring her on. Let's get some plumbing
Yeah,
tips.
but I don't change my own oil. I did when I first got my, when I was 16, I
Yeah.
changed my oil because I lived on a farm and I had a place where I could do it, and it was a little bit easier and cleaner and simple. Um, but I don't change my own oil today, and if something happens with my car, I don't even troubleshoot. I just kind of bring it into the mechanic. So,
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying that it's morally, right or wrong, but I just see some merit in us retaining that interest and capacity to
Yeah.
be able to do some things on our own and be able to solve some problems and figure things out. Even things like meal preparation is kind of diminished a lot, and a lot of people that wouldn't know how to prepare a meal for themselves.
Right.
It's really going to the fast food restaurant or buying pre-made meals. Um, and I mean, I think
Right.
there are probably some health limitations to that
Right.
approach too.
So there's a before I go make my statement. If you're listening, if you have questions, feel free to share. If you have comments, you can share those too. It's just a little bit easier to put a question to the guest than a comment. There have been some comments though, by the way, Dr. Bolt.
Well,
Uh,
should we take some of the comments and talk about them or not?
well, we've got the OJ Wolf Smasher who says he's old. Um, JB, and you know these people, by the way. Do you, J,
So, can I tell you a story about Wolf Smasher?
yeah, go for it.
All right, good. So, we've known him. We were college classmates, right? So the three of us were, and and he stayed. He lived in at our house for a little while when he was moving and shifting places, and he's always been a creative writer. And sorry about this, Wolf Smasher, if you don't want me telling this, but too late. So, um, so this was right not long after September 11th, and he had a blog at that time, and he had written something about these two buildings. I don't remember all the details,
That's right.
but these two buildings in Texas, and I think he kind of personified the buildings where they were talking to one another or something like that, and and um, the FBI knocked on the door to check in with him because I guess I don't know, maybe they suspected there was, they just wanted to confirm there was nothing going on there, given what had just happened with the
Uh,
towers. And I love folk art. This actually ties in a very indirect way. I'm intrigued by people who are self-taught artists, self-taught musicians, other things like that. I love kind of folk developed skills that kind of emerge out of different groups. So I collect religious art from usually with different kind of ethnic influences and the like. And there's a Ethiopian American artist that I really like a lot. And I was intrigued by one of her pieces of art that was a depiction of the Tower of Babel. um, and it's a huge pic. Like I still have the picture. I can see it over here in my living room.
I
I
bet you
mean,
can.
It's like 36 inches tall, like 24 by 36. It's a big framed picture. And so when the FBI knocked on the door and we opened the door, on the wall behind me is a painting of the Tower of Babel. Um, or I don't know if it was he who opened the door or I did, but I just knew the painting was there, and I don't know if
Uh-huh.
they ever saw it or not. But I thought, well, that's
A
interesting, and
little awkward, yeah.
that's right.
Yeah. Well, we have not solicited from him anything more than concern about what you were going to say. So, to go back to what I was going to say, part of the problem comes in when you introduce the government into these things. Because if you have voluntary associations, voluntary professional organizations, for example, that you can just sort of create on the fly and you can join them or not join them. I think probably a professional organization for just about anything is going to have probably value if that's, especially if your livelihood's tied to it, right? You can get together and you can perfect your trade or your art, whatever it is. But then when the force of law comes into it, now you've turned it into an entirely new thing. And now to deviate from whatever that is risks fines and consequently jail time if you don't pay the fines or whatnot. And this is there's on the one hand you've got the problem where you have people who may have spent 10 years learning a trade only to have AI replace it in 5 days, right? And now they're going to have to go for another 10 years. And what are they going to do in the meantime? Deliver pizzas, I guess. um, I'm joking because that's what I had to do. And now, um, with the force of law associated with them, so like the level of regulation matters. Like if you have the federal government trying to figure out how best to manage 300 million people, it's not going to go well. And even if the state does it, it's not going to go very well. And I would say I could point to lots of examples where it doesn't. But even at the county level, I've seen problems. So, for example, this is a totally true story. A couple years ago, the a county near me decided that they were going to require that Amish households meet code as far as fire detectors go, smoke detectors. Well, that means having them tied in with the electrical system so that when you can't use the batteries, they have to be tied into the electrical system, right? So you can start to see where this is going. They don't have an electrical system, so therefore there's no way they can meet code. And this county actually began barring Amish people from their own homes, like putting boards across them so they couldn't go into their own homes. This community that has lived very well in this way for hundreds of years, right? They don't want to die from being burned down any more than anybody else, right? And they figured out a way to generally not die. That's why they're here today. But it took a state law to tell this county, like, what are you doing? And after this, I'll just round this out and then I'll turn it back to you. After this, I went to my own state legislator and I said, I think you did a really good thing there, but you realize that the rest of us have a lot of codes that we don't want to have to follow either. Like when it went into the state, when the state did it, they framed it in if you had religious objections. I don't have objections to smoke detectors per se, but I have objections to other things that they make me do, you know. And like, there are other ways to solve the problems than to have a state legislature of say 200 people tell 5 million people how to live their lives. I mean, just so the level of government intrusion in this, as soon as the government gets involved in it, I think is where you really have the problem with the credentialism, the specialization, and the professional societies. What do you think?
Yeah, I see real value in the idea of standards. I like the idea of establishing sort of hallmarks of excellence or something like that. I can see some real merit in the idea of saying, here's what it looks like when something is done really well, to give someone a bar to aim
Yeah.
for and the like. The question that you're getting into, though, is okay. So we have the standards, but then i- i- uh, are laws and formal regulations and fines, um, is that necessary? Um, Necessary in this sort of this to go to this next level. I'm guessing, I mean, in the case, like if you were sitting down with the individuals that were fighting for requiring wired um, fire alarms in Amish homes, I'd be
Mm,
curious to know what their rationale was. Did they really think they were doing it to protect the Amish people? Because I mean, these are folks that are living out in the country. It's not like, or maybe they were afraid that the fire was going to spread to their town if their house burnt down. Like I'm trying to figure out what
yeah.
would be the what is the real protection? What are they trying to do?
Yeah.
Or is it just that in some of those instances, people have become so immersed in a world of regulation that they just believe that regulations in and of themselves are good and noble, but they're not. They're just tools to help accomplish something else. And so there's a place for regulation, absolutely, but um, that's the part that concerns me. That's sort of that. I don't even know if that's not credentialism, but that's sort of this over-regulated this idea that regulation is the only way to accomplish something good
Yeah.
in a given town or something like that.
So that speaks to the mindset uh, that I was trying to bring up with the Frederick Taylor thing. Like you've got a kind of person that says, you know, if it saves just one life, kind of a thing. Well, if you're as soon as you bring up that logic, if you play that all the way through, we're all going to be living in little styrofoam boxes, right? That
Yeah,
would save many more than one lives if they just stuck us in a styrofoam box, put our food in through a tray or whatever. So you could do that, I guess, but we'd quickly lose our humanity, and it would be a terrible society. It'd be the making of every dystopian novel, right? So like there's tension there, and to bring it back around a little bit to maybe what we're talking about, it's like it's the outsider voice that is able to expose that sentiment better than the person who's inside that system. Like if and
right.
it what kind of where I'm going with this is you often hear people say, well, he's speaking outside his field of expertise, right? But yeah, okay, like everything that we've said, and I think you agree with this. There's merit to everything in balance and proportion, but like even that idea is crazy, like, or can be abused. We'll say it's going to be somebody who's outside of the system, outside of the field, who is more likely going to be able to see the absurdities within that field than the ones inside it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned though in the principles of scientific management, the premise he even states it explicitly that the goal is to have one right way to do things. Like that's part of the process that he outlines in the book. Is sort of
Yeah,
in a factory setting, and a real clear, strong delineation between those who do the work and those who manage those who do the work. Um, and those who manage to do the work
yeah,
establish the rules and the policies, and there's one right way to do it, and the goal is to maximize efficiency um, and increase productivity, right?
yeah,
So
right,
um, that and I do think that that's one of the concerns. That's why I wrote a little book a number of years ago about this called Breathe, where this is where it does show up in the education system sometime, is that there are values that are really tied to scientific management, the industrial revolution, sort of a factory concept, that there are values that help that system flourish. There are values like mass production and efficiency and quantification and other things like that. Oh, I didn't even know the book was for sale still, but I thought I pulled it off the the web. But the um, the the problem with and those are all good. Like they're good and noble. Efficiency and quantification, mass production can all achieve good things. But they don't actually inspire excellence, and they don't inspire people to reach sort of their greatest level of skill and expertise. That actually comes from a different set of values that are less technological and much more deeply human,
Hmm.
fundamentally human. I mean, the values that are really deeply human are, I do believe that the notion of excellence versus efficiency. Excellence, I believe, is a more human value, the pursuit of excellence, the sense of a quest, of being on a noble quest and trying to solve a problem for the good of those that you're trying to serve or love. So that nobility of the quest, um, the value of compassion for other people, the value of wonder and mystery. Um, like these are so fundamentally human that you can find them in literature of every civilization on the planet going back millennia,
Hmm.
right? Um, and they're still the values that are most that lead to much more enriching kind of work and uh, family life and other things like that too. Obviously one of the values is meaning itself, and
Hmm.
I would contend faith. Understanding and asking those questions about the meaning of life, which points us ultimately to the fact that there is a God, and we are not that God, and that leads us into a whole kind of theological journey as well.
I think I'm gonna have to buy your book.
Yeah,
I like
it's
it.
okay. It's an okay book, but
I think it's funny that you came out with a book called Breathe 4 weeks before COVID. Uh,
isn't that interesting? So here, let me tell you the premise behind the title. So
all right.
the overriding analogy that I use is at the beginning of the book, I describe a situation of a person who is having difficulty concentrating. Um, and eventually they start developing all these kinds of symptoms where ultimately they go unconscious. And I say, describe what happened. What was the cause of all of these symptoms? And I was describing hypoxia, oxygen deficiency. I was describing the sort of the physical symptoms of oxygen deficiency, and then I said, so the problem is, I believe that our education system has unfortunately started to rebuild itself on values that are oxygenless. That we've used these kind of scientific management and other kind of industrialized sort of technological values that are better for machines than they are for people,
Right.
um, and we've built a lot of our systems around it. And I say, when you look at the best of education, when education is really doing something good, it's fundamentally rooted in these deeply human values around meaning and quest and compassion and those other kinds of things that I describe. And so that's really what the book is I describe kind of use that analogy, and I say, here are the values that are good. They can play a role, efficiency and quantification, but ultimately when it comes down to deep, rich, lasting, meaningful education, it's going to be tied more to pursuit of truth and beauty and goodness and
Right.
other kinds of much more persistent virtues and values.
So before I go further, let me verbalize that if you have questions or comments for our guest, or for some reason me, go ahead and post them in the comments. And I should also highlight the book that we do publish, um, of Dr. Bowles. This is the Kindle edition. Yeah, paperback. There it is. So if you wanted to pick that up, you certainly could, and we would both like that, obviously. Um, I wanted to share with you a story. Uh, this kind of a tangent, but like when um when my daughter has spina bifida, you know that, but my guests might not know that. But when before she was born, we we knew that we were gonna have to have this procedure to put a shunt in her skull to get the cerebral spinal fluids out. And in the course of the conversation with that neurosurgeon, um, at one point, I I asked a question, something to the I don't even remember what it was, but he said he kind of like, well, there is a reason why I'm the neurosurgeon, kind of like, and me, that kind of thing does not go over very well with me. But when it came time for her to actually be born, um, he was on vacation. Okay, so she was born, and she had to be airlifted to another hospital where there'd be an entirely different neurosurgeon. So whatever. So she was born. She was taken out off in a helicopter, and my wife had like 5 minutes at most to see her. And shortly after, maybe the next morning, I think it was next morning, I was on the road driving 2 hours to get to this hospital. And I'm on the interstate, and I get a phone call, and it's the other neurosurgeon. And the other neurosurgeon says, so we want to try this, we want to do this procedure. Um, but it's kind of experimental. But if it goes well, then she'll she'll never have a shunt problem ever again. And we knew by that time from our research that shunt problems were a very common issue for spinal bifida kids. It can cause lots of problems. So to never have a problem with the shunt, obviously, we that'd be good. But of course, I'm driving. I don't have any time at all to research this procedure, to look it up, to check anything about it whatsoever. Uh, And she's on the table. I forgot to mention that. She's on the table. They're doing the surgery. They're prepping her. That moment, well, my cell signal is going in and out. And so finally, all I could say was, "What if it was your daughter? What would you do?" That was like literally all I had. Um, and he said, "Well, I would definitely do it." Okay, so fast forward like a week or so, um, he I found out that the procedure, the number one side effect of that procedure is death. He failed to mention this in our phone call, right? But I mean, I can kind of understand like how it went down. I don't blame him completely for it. But I had a conversation with him as we were talking about going forward or whatever, and I don't remember what it was, but he said to me, oh, I should mention the way that he did it was completely opposite of the way our first neurosurgeon did it. Like the two pediatric neurosurgeons, completely opposite perspectives on what to do, completely. And this new guy says, when I asked the question, says, well, I am kind of, there's a reason why I'm the neurosurgeon, right? So you got both guys offering completely contradictory viewpoints on the way to approach the problem, and both of them appeal to their specialty. But I'm the one who has to make the decision for my daughter whether or not basically she'll live or die, right? If she dies on the table underneath either of them, they might feel bad, but they don't have to live with it, right? And that would be 2007. And I have to say that moment for me has completely obliterated any deference to authority that I could ever have. Like you're never going to be able to stand in front of me ever again. Nobody will ever be able to say, well, I'm the neurosurgeon, so we'll just do what I say. Because I know all I have to do is walk 5 feet, and I found another neurosurgeon that will say the exact opposite, right? And to bring it back to a less personal thing, one of the problems with this whole mentality of this hyper specialization, you can't speak outside of your field or whatever, is there's so many decisions that require thinking in data from multiple fields, right? Like
Yeah.
for example, like there's a reason why we have in our country, it's the civilians that are in charge of the generals, right? Yeah, the generals know how to fight war, but they may not be the right persons to decide whether or not we ought to go to war.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I see a lot of yeah. I hear what you're saying, and this is something that some are really struggling with. You know, for you and I both come from a Lutheran Christian background, and we talk about in the Christian background this doctrine of vocation, this
Mm-hmm.
idea that it's God at work through us to offer His gifts to our neighbor through our gifts, and so oftentimes the doctrine of vocation is used to sort of affirm professionalism. And it has a role. I mean, the reality is if someone is in my room right now and they start having a heart attack and they need immediate heart surgery to save them, if I go in my kitchen and grab a steak knife and start trying to do surgery, that's called murder. But if a but if a trained doctor does it, it's a
Mm-hmm.
love of neighbor. You know, I
Right,
mean, that's
right.
so I get that. There's absolutely expertise to be deeply respected, admired. There's a lot there. But here's the flip side, and I'll use a less. I mean, that yours was wow. I can't imagine, what that was like. But this one was really personally for me. It was pretty challenging. I don't know if you know this about me, but in my 20s, I started developing migraine headaches to the point where I would have 3 to 4 migraines a week. And the migraines would last 8, 10, 12, sometimes 24
Mm.
hours. And I was like taking way too much Excedrin migraine just to try to make it through, like if it happened in the middle of a school day and other things like that, which caused a lot of problems internally when you're taking that medicine too regularly and all. Um, and I struggled with migraines 3 to 4 a week to the point where I mean, I was getting depressed. It was having a really negative impact on my life and my work and other things like that. And I'm sure my family didn't enjoy it. And that was from age probably 27 or 28 until my 40s.
Wow.
And I tried everything. I mean, everything you've ever heard, even things I didn't believe in. I thought I'm going to give it a try, whatever,
Right.
I tried all these things. I went to neurologists, had all sorts of things done. They gave me these medicines, which I just did not like the way they made me feel, and because the side effects were really unpleasant and all, but sometimes it was it was either that or this just debilitating kind of headache where I just have to kind of hide out in my room and just pray for it to pass. Um, and I'm in the grocery store one day, and those little magazines and books that they try to sell you as you're in the grocery store line. There was one that was called something like I forget the exact title, something like the Miracle Migraine Cure, or something like that. I remember it was a green book, and it was written by a neurologist who struggled with migraines himself, and his professional training didn't actually help him solve it for himself. And so he was using the common sort of recommendations that sort of standard protocol and practice would recommend and the like. And so he just started researching on his own, even beyond the scope of what he kind of learned in medical school and his further training and the like, and began to and develop this kind of theory that um, that the reason we find such difficulty addressing migraines is because we often assume it's just one thing, and he argues that it's actually a collection of things, and if you have too many of these negatives or not enough of these positives, then you're more prone to getting a migraine or a headache. And it did involve a pretty rigorous type of thing. So, and I took that book and I followed everything. I put all the positives in, all the negatives, consistent sleep schedule, regular exercise. I cut out all caffeine, all gluten. I cut out all alcohol, and just did everything in the book. And I think it was within 2 weeks, I was down to like maybe one migraine a week, and within a month or two, I didn't have migraines, and now I do get headaches sometimes, or I might have to take one ibuprofen or something like that. But I have not had a full blown migraine for years.
Wow.
So I went from 3 to 4 a week to hardly any, like maybe one a year, one every few years or something like that. My first year of being migraine free, Tony, was when I wrote that first book you just put up. I wrote 4 books in 1 year because I felt so incredibly productive because this is what life is like
Right.
without headaches. I had like a whole work week added to my week
Yeah.
because I was trying, anytime I didn't have a headache, I was trying to catch up with my work, and then I wouldn't get enough sleep and that would cause another headache, right? And so now I had this whole thing. I had a blog, which probably I had e-tail, which was one of the top visited education blogs on the internet for over a decade, and I was kicking out like 5 or 6 articles a week. I mean, today if I did that, everyone would think I was using AI. But I was I was feeling so productive, and all of that came from a grocery store book that probably wouldn't have made it into a peer-reviewed journal in
Yeah.
the field.
Definitely not. Yeah.
You know, um, and now, can I say that that's going to work for everyone else? I don't know. I'm not sure, but I do know that there wasn't much harm. There was no medication. There was nothing in the prescription. It was a prescription, a lifestyle prescription,
Hmm.
nothing that was high risk, and yet, um, I don't know why. I mean, I'm not sure why this isn't a regiment that's just being recommended for people to try as a first
Right.
attempt for anyone that's struggling with migraines. Um, but that's an example of where the elitism part of professionalism can get in the way sometimes, and we trust in the expertise so much that we just we stop being willing to at least use critical thought
Yeah.
to
Right.
maybe look for some options for ourselves.
So
Looks like
yeah.
you have some comments or questions that you were reading or something.
Well, Wolf Smasher, he says he pumps out 4 articles a week right now, but they're all fake.
I don't. Oh, he does.
He does. Yeah.
Oh,
So we do have a real question. So how do we? Here's the question: how do we roll back this trend?
yeah. I mean, I don't think there is such a thing as rolling back. There's no returning to a moment in the past because it doesn't work that way. Obviously, that's like saying, how do I go back to being 30? You
Hmm.
know, the so I don't think we can do that, but I do think that we can develop some habits and we can strengthen some muscles, and that help promote the merit of agency and ownership. It's actually fundamental to kind of the American experiment. This is part of what really helped us get uh, uh, make it through some key times in sort of our national history and all, as well as people who had this kind of spirit, and approach to learning beyond even formal learning. I mean, again, I'm a big advocate for formal learning when done well. Um, so I think that part of it is lifting up these kinds of practices, of thinking for yourself, asking tough questions. You can respect people in authority while also challenging. From a biblical perspective, there's even a notion of this for Christians in the book of Acts. It commends the people in the town of Berea. It says the Bereans were of more noble character because when Paul came and preached to them, they examined the scriptures to see if what Paul said was true, as opposed to just mindlessly rejecting him or mindlessly believing him.
Hmm.
They stepped in and did some work for themselves. So I think we can nurture that kind of uh, perspective. And of course, I guess we can also advocate against overregulation and realize that there can and should be some limits to regulation.
Yeah. So one of the things that you said earlier about your book Breathe, when you were talking about that in general, about what's at stake now. I'm paraphrasing is to what degree are you going to be human, right? Like a lot of the paradigms that are out there are ultimately dehumanizing in the sense where they might not be like intentionally doing so, but like a person is not really built to thrive if their job is to be in a cubicle for 9 to 5 and just sit there and type. Like that person is going to go become sick in some way, probably. and I think a lot of times people know that, and they try to find ways, you know, to compensate for that. The problem is when society itself, especially with accompanied by the force of law, strips away people's humanity. They view people as machines that are designed to, that in their mind ought to fit into society in a particular way, like a screw that fits just right into a machine. And we're not machines. And if we ever start acting that way, we're just gonna hurt ourselves and hurt others. So I would say, not that anyone wanted my opinion, but I think that even more than like individually in our own lives, we have to sort of mark out our own territory and say, you know, yeah, okay, I understand that you have expertise, but you can yell at me all you want, but I'm not doing that. Whatever it is, and to as I've said, I think one of the real problems is when the government becomes attached to some of these trends. To just tell the government, say, you need to pound sand. This is not your business. You don't need to be involved. Just stay out of it, and then vote that way too. Um,
Yeah.
we we have a comment. Why are you bringing up the late David Horowitz, Ajit? I'll give him a chance to reply to
I'm not
that.
sure. Did they say why are you or why aren't you?
No, all he did was in response to what I said. He said the now late David Horowitz. So I don't
Oh.
know what he's referring to. So I'm gonna give him a chance to. Maybe he told people to pound sand too. I'm not sure.
Hey, so I'm feeling creative since we're talking about doing different things.
Okay.
I wrote a spoken word poem about this kind of topic
All
in
right.
education. And I don't know if I don't know if I think I'd like to share it. Are you okay with it? It's a little
Yeah.
bit long. It'll take about 3 or 4 minutes.
Oh, well then you do that while I get some rum. I'll be right back.
I guess that means that I guess that means
All right, I'm
I guess
back.
that means you're not interested in the poem, huh?
No, I think it'll be great, and it'll be better if I have some rum.
Okay, here we go.
All right.
So goes like this. William Farish, so the legend goes, was a math tutor from Oxford who was drinking out of a fire hose. Too many students, too little time, but they paid him by the student and he only had a dime. So he came up with a clever plan to take the lessons from the factory and to build a very satisfactory solution to his plight. He called it efficiency, a brilliant plan to rate and rank proficiency and deficiency of each and every learner with half the time, half the work, twice the pay, and a simple framework. Show me your homework and I'll give you a grade. And this single letter will tell you all that you need to know. And are you flourishing? Are you floundering? How much did you grow? Should you stay or go? It's a single letter manifesto about what you know. No more long written letters of guidance. Grade them, rate them, rank them, and one. Give them an A for outstanding and an F for too bad. So now William could multiply that dime that he had. Now, this probably isn't history. In fact, it isn't true, but it points us to a mystery that impacts every one of you. Why a boy goes to school and first thinks it's cool, but he comes for a quest and they give him a test. They do it again and again until he looks like the rest, until he's obsessed with ranking his gifts and abilities from the worst to the best. He gets graded and rated and sorted and ranked. He comes for learning, but his curiosity is flanked, and all of that love of learning is spanked out of his head and his heart. He's told that he's smart, that his life gets a jump start if he's silent and just learns his part. So he trades in his grand quest of learning for a backpack of earning full of grades and papers with stickers and stars that lead to a magic piece of paper that declares who you are. Put it on your wall, stand tall, let the people stand in awe of the graded, rated, questless man before them. But he's more than that, and so are you. So let me tell you a story about boy number 2. He came to school and the grading, rating, ranking began, but he didn't let it distract him from his noble quest and his grand plan. He looked for the mysteries and he sought out the wonder. He danced in the rain and welcomed the thunder. He nurtured a mindset of experimentation, sought out collaboration, persisted through frustration. He took on wicked problems and bit off more than he could chew. He just kept eating until he learned something new. He played like a child, but sought wisdom like an elder. He created and constructed ideas like a welder. He asked and he questioned and inquired some more. And when a cliche like opportunity knocked, he was not too proud to open that door. He built and he drew, he tested and tried. He climbed up the mountain and then he explored all the way down the other side. He saw failure as feedback, so he listened and learned. He took risks, he got lost, he trusted, he got burned, he found allies and took on quests that were impossible alone. And he hunted truth with a bag full of curiosity stones that he threw with abandon until something new was known. And when others judged his resolve to transcend, he chiseled virtue out of the stones thrown at him and his friends. When the teacher said, meaning is just what you make it, he refused to just sit there and take it. He sought truth, beauty, and goodness, triple majored in purpose, meaning, and mission, and rejected the standard call to embrace selfish ambition. He chose hope over despair, rejected apathy in lieu of genuine care. He ignored the persistent call to assess his God-given quest, even if he was sometimes as lost as the rest. But they still sorted and graded and rated and ranked him. He'd sometimes just smile and thank them, then quickly return to his questions and callings. He learned for himself and he learned for the other. He used what he knew and could do to bless his sisters and brothers. He knew that learning and knowledge and skills earned from his labor are all gifts to just be shared out of love for the neighbor. So here's my request. No, here's my plea. Trade your mindset of earning for learning, and this is what I can guarantee. You'll learn that truth tastes better than grades. Beauty enlightens and inspires more than A's. And the pursuit of goodness is fuel for your quest, so much more than the chase after the best letters on your tests. You'll meet purpose and meaning, mastery and wonder, mystery and wisdom, and the chance to love people and learn that each one is far more than a grade or a number. There we go.
I felt like I needed to that movie. So I married an axe murderer. Right? Like it had that rhythm where I should have been. Yeah, I can't do it. But so when did you write that?
I don't know, a couple of years ago.
So can you stay on a little bit longer? Can we keep talking a little bit?
Oh yeah, you bet. Mm-hmm.
Okay. The thought that comes to my mind, like one of the many thoughts, is like on the advice that's sort of built into that is, I mean, I resonate with it, but like for the professionals, the teachers, like they're on the hook for how well that kid does on his grades, right? So like you can almost see how the pressure could mount on on student A, right? Because everyone's like looking at like their own livelihoods are tied to whether or not he aces that freaking test. So it's like he can buck against that system, but it'd be a lot better if the system itself would ease up.
Yeah. Well, and fortunately, that's the good thing. That's why when people say, what kind of education system do you think is helpful? I say, well, I want to have a really diverse educational ecosystem. That's why I'm not, there's certain models of education that I have really high regard for, and I can be a very strong champion for. There are portions of classical education that I just think are really inspiring and valuable for this moment in time, especially sort of battling the spirit of the age, because they see wisdom in lessons from the past and great texts and so forth. But the reason I don't advocate for a single one is because there's a real risk that if that became sort of the sole model of education, it would just become another set of kind of rules and regulations.
Right. Yeah.
And also it just doesn't fit everyone. There are different kinds of models of education that are going to serve. Now, I'm not suggesting that truth is relative at all when I say that. But I do think that there is no, like, as a Christian, I don't think there's one biblically prescribed model of schooling that God says is good and all the others are bad. We are to align our approaches to education with that, with God's word, with the truth of God's word. But that can look different in the same way that not every family looks exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And so what I often say is, the best that I think we can do is be real strong advocates and champions for choice and a diverse education ecosystem. Put the choice and the power into the hands of the parents, and allow them to try to have some say in what's going to work for kids, rather than just kind of forcing them into this one option that's available to them, and create enough educational options that parents have some real choices, and to be able to kind of examine them. It's actually really timely. This is a different subject, but the Supreme Court has been debating, I think at the time of this recording, about what would be potentially, if the Supreme Court favored in their favor,
Right.
the first religious charter school.
Right.
And I know people disagree with that. They think that it would encroach upon sort of separation of church and state. And then the other side is arguing that to not support them would be a form of religious discrimination,
Right.
because the funds are going to others. But the choice in charter, that's actually why I've been a strong advocate for choice in charter schools, because it gives more options. It allows this kind of agency that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to keep talking a little bit since you're open to it. But I will mention we do have about 8 viewers right now. So if you have questions, you can feel free to post them. I don't know if we'll get to them. But like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all the stuff I hate saying because I feel like a loser. But really helps if you do that in the future. So I've really just, you and I on a lot of these things we agree on a lot of that stuff, but there's like a practical problem, and I want to play like devil's advocate here for a minute, because the tension is that, let's say you're like a 17 or 18-year-old coming out of high school, you have to figure out what you're going to do next, and whatever that is going to make sure that you don't starve to death, right? And so the system is designed to funnel people into specialized tracks. That's the system, and employers, which give you your livelihood, are all orientated towards that. So, like, it seems to me like to go back to your narration, to be student number 2 is to kind of like to resign yourself to poverty in the current situation. I mean, you don't agree?
Well, I don't. I mean, I'm actually going to Chat GPT right now.
Okay.
I'm gonna use, in this deeply human advocacy for deeply human things, I'm gonna outsource my brain to Chat
I'm
GPT.
ready with Grok to respond.
And here's what I did. What
Okay.
I asked it was, give me a list of good paying, high demand jobs that I can get the training for in 6 months or less.
Okay.
Right now, for example, we actually have a new program at our university called Micah Scholars. It comes from Micah 6:8. He's shown you, a man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, but to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. And these are students who have a heart for a head for science and a heart for service. And they want to serve possibly in some kind of healthcare profession, maybe go on to grad school and do medical research or something like that. And we want to really give them the grounding and the preparation. But in the process, we also, one of the first things they get to do is they get to develop some certifications and things like that, where they can get good paying jobs right away. One of them is a CNA. You could get your CNA, certified nurse's assistant job. And I knew one young man who actually graduated before he went to seminary. He graduated from our university, and he'd taken out more loans than maybe he should have, or something like that. And so he had a lot of debt, and the seminary actually discouraged him from going straight to seminary until he paid some of those off. Now, granted, this was during the end of COVID, so CNAs were getting paid extra because there was hazard pay and other things like that. But he paid off all of his debt in less than 12 months. So he graduated with his degree, and then he went and got the CNA quickly over the summer, and he was making, I don't know exactly how much, but I got a sense that he was making $80,000+ a year, that kind of pay. So I don't think it's an either or. Like, I think that's really commendable for a student that would come to college. I encourage them to think about that. get yourself a EMT certification or CNA if you care about these things. And so here's what it came up with, by the way. I don't know if I think the first one would work well with going to college, but they said a commercial truck driver. EMT, um,
Commercial truck driver.
yeah,
He's
certified
not wrong.
HVAC technician can make 50 to 80,000 with 3 to 6 months of training. Welding certificate you can get in 3 to 6 months, 45 to 70,000. Computer support specialist, 6 months of training. Get your A plus certification. Google IT support certificate, 50 to 70. Medical coding and billing, 50,000 plus and 4 to 6 months of training. A phlebotomist, if you like needles, you like to poke people, 2 to 4 months, 37 to 50,000. Licensed insurance sales agent, 3 to 6 months. So my whole point is, I mean, and you go on, they do digital marketing certification. You could be a massage therapist, I guess they're saying here. Cosmetology can pay 30 to 60,000 with a shorter training path. Flight attendant. So I'd actually think that there are some paths for people that like you can do two journey. You can go, maybe you want to develop this kind of longer term kind of educational path or journey, and you could you could do this. I don't know any student that's done this, but I wonder how long it takes to be a flight attendant, because I think flight attendants can actually, you get in a pool and you can sort of accept jobs or not. Like you can do it kind of part-time. Wonder if a student could actually be a flight attendant and pay their way through school by doing flights on the weekends and summers. Be interesting.
Two things. One, as a humorous aside, I told you I had Grok ready. So in Grok, I asked, "Is Dr. Bull wrong?" And this confused Grok tremendously.
With a last name like Bull, probably so. I'm assuming it would say.
More seriously, all the examples that you gave me, or ChatGPT gave us, were all, again, the certification stuff. They're all like,
That's right.
You know, it's like you're going to go into a silo whether you like it or not.
Yeah, except that, I mean, the one thing is at least these are lower threshold kind of certifications. You know, I mean, so there is a path there. So yeah,
Okay.
fair enough.
So we did have a legit question. Are AI tools like ChatGPT a plus for people to become more generalists or not? And I take that, can we use AI to help us become Renaissance men?
Yeah. So I think this is I don't know the answer to it for sure, because I think this is kind of like one of those questions about, do calculators help you be better at math or not as good at math types of things. AI is a really advanced form of a cognitive enhancement, right? Humans have used cognitive enhancements all the time. You're using one right now in your glasses that are on your face, right? That's
Not anymore.
That's right. Now you can't see me, but
That was a
but
joke.
so we've been using cognitive enhancements for a very, very long time, and AI is just a far more intimidating one, and its potential and risks are beyond what we can fully imagine, especially when we start getting into questions of super intelligence and things like that. But I think that it is. So I was talking to someone who's doing research on AI and education, and um, and I had just been intuitively thinking through this, and she'd actually been doing the real work of doing research and trying to determine best what works and what doesn't with AI in an education setting and all. And interestingly enough, we ended up at the same place. So one of the things that I told her was, I said that I think that AI can be very powerful for learning and for teaching, but I think that it actually requires more work than not using AI in order to be used best. So it actually, if you think about, this is sometimes a debunked model. Like there are more psychologists have newer models for thinking about different levels of thinking, but Bloom's taxonomy was one that educators oftentimes use. And there's sort of this lowest level of thinking is just kind of um, kind of gathering information. It's not a very complex level of thinking, and then you get up to these level of evaluation and creation, and that requires a greater load on your brain to do. Like that's a more complex kind of task to be able to develop the capacity to do that kind of thing. If a teacher, for example, is using AI to teach in order to just have less work to do and they want to do things quickly, so they outsource grading to AI, they just sacrificed one of their greatest contributions as an educator, which is to be a mentor for a student, right? In a world of information, teachers, the greatest thing a teacher has to offer is not just more information, but it's to mentor students in their cultivation of knowledge and wisdom and skill and and to give them encouragement and things like that. So I know that wasn't the question, but I say this because I could use AI to be a better mentor, but that actually requires me to think much more deeply at a higher level to ask to learn how to put in prompts in ways that are much more sophisticated, to understand the flaws of AI and its limitations and its systems, to have a deep enough knowledge base behind the scenes on what I'm asking about to know when it's messing up, right? Um, and and so yes, I think it's possible. I use AI on a daily basis for little tasks. I, for example, though, have developed own personal codes. Anytime I write anything, I actually have a disclaimer on my blog now explaining how I don't use AI. And if I ever use it for something more, I will disclose it at the beginning or somewhere in my article so people know whether it's a actual Bernard Bull article or AI generated or AI partnered or something like that. Um, so I actually think that AI can be a amplifying tool for some cognitive functions and skills. I use it, for example, I was working on a couple of new skills on the guitar, and I went into ChatGPT and had it generate a couple of sort of cheat sheets for me to practice. I've been working on Spanish. I had it develop me a conjugation cheat sheet really quickly and things like that. Or if I'm going to be reading a book, say I want to try to read The Little Prince in French, I could go to ChatGPT and say, scan the whole vocabulary of Little Prince and create me some flashcards that will help me master the vocabulary of this one book. Like those kinds of tasks. But that requires me to actually do some legwork and some thinking and to have some goals for myself and the like. I will tell you one thing. This is kind of unrelated. I know it's a tangent, Tony, but um, I did something really, kind of it was a little frightening, the answer that it gave me because I kinda liked it too much. But I have a bucket list, things I wanna accomplish, God willing, if God keeps me around here on this planet that long enough, and I have a list of goals for my 50s, and I cut and pasted them all into ChatGPT recently, and I said, "Based upon all of these goals, give me a day in the life of my future self if I were to have achieved this." And it wrote out, like a day by like a time, like waking up at 5 in the morning and going through. It was it was compelling. It was like, "Hey, that's the future I want." It actually got it right. But, I do play around and experiment with it. I do think it could have some potential. It certainly has some downsides too, and I think there's a real risk that it could be used to, to defer really deep critical thinking and creative thinking as well. I don't know. What do you think? What's your answer to the question? Oh, no, I didn't see that one. No, Uh-oh, your battery.
All right, can y'all hear me now? I'm not wasn't muted. This the stupid battery on the thing died. I was anyway. So I was talking about. He asked me, well, you heard what he said. And I said I use AI to generate the images for the thumbnail. Um, I use AI to generate a song. I will send that to you, Dr. Bull. I can't believe that you didn't see that already. Um, anyway, I it's really interesting because to me, my philosophy towards technology is my philosophy for anything actually, which is I will be the master, not the servant. So I don't rule out the use of anything. I just want to make sure that I'm the one in charge of whatever it is, and that means thinking in big terms. Um, so, like for example, I know for that if I use AI to generate the images for the thumbnail, that means I'm not hiring the guy that I usually use for my artist, which means that I am possibly impacting his livelihood, right? So, like, it's a very sophisticated analysis. It's not just like it's not surface level. I try not to be surface level anyway with these kinds of things. And so I think the problem here here's my quick takeaway. I think that in the to the extent that AI can be appropriately used by people who will be the master of it and not the servant, inevitably what's going to happen is the whole society is just going to give themselves over to it. Like they have no self control. If there is a way to use technology to make things easier for themselves or whatever, they're going to do it. Doesn't matter what the cost. Because I'm like I've, I'm like 1 in 1,000. And so the way that I'm preparing myself to be the 1 in 1,000, you know, so everyone around me is going to be using the AI for everything and its mother to screw up a metaphor, and I'm not going to be that person, so I don't know how I'm going to be able to exist in that society. We have
Can I say just one thought? This is I've given a couple of talks on AI and presentations, and one of my opening lines that I've kind of played around with is, and it seems like, well, what's the relevance of that? But I really believe this is the core, kind of to maybe what you were saying too, which is AI can write a beautiful tearjerker of a love letter, but it can't mean it.
right, right,
And it matters, like, this is the humanizing piece. It matters that we as humans invest ourselves in things that have meaning. That's important for the human experience. It's important for us to do that. And so if I'm writing a love letter, I'm having AI write a love letter to someone, and it makes them feel loved by me and feel good. um, Maybe that accomplishes something in some kind of transactional way,
right,
but I lost the experience of meaning what I wrote, and that makes me a different person. And I think not in a good way. And like, those are the kinds of things that we're going to need to be thinking about. Like, who do you want to be? And you know this. We've talked about technology before. We make the technology, and then over time, it shapes us into its own image.
yeah,
Every technology
right,
does that over time, and AI is doing that. We're already starting to see the ways in which it's shaping people, and there is no perfect palliative from that. It will shape us over time, but we can at least be aware, and we can kind of fight it. I'll give you one historic example quickly, that's really different to illustrate this with technology. The phonograph, sort of the Edison machine, when it was first created, Edison really wanted to market it as perfectly replicating the human voice. And so they even had advertisements, if you look back, about how it perfectly replicates the human voice. Only it was a lie. It didn't. Like, if you picture the phonograph sound, we all know kind of how it has that sort of wah wah kind of
tinny,
nasal sound and all. Yeah, right. Tinny and nasally. And so what did they do? The record labels taught the musicians to sing like the recording in their live concerts.
interesting,
And then over time, all the kids grew up hearing the live musicians sing like the recording. And so then all of a sudden, you had a whole style of music where people were singing in a technological way, trying to replicate the technology.
Come on,
Uh,
this is not real, is it? Is that
it
true?
is, yes, yes.
Give
This
me a
is real.
source. What's the
What's
source?
that?
I
I
want to
have
find out
multiple.
more.
I have multiple sources. I have to pull it all together. I
All right,
actually gave
send
a
me
paper on
one
this.
later. Okay,
Yeah,
send me
I
one
gave a
later.
paper on this at Concordia Seminary St. Louis. On this was one of my examples, so I
Okay,
have this work somewhere.
that's
But
crazy.
it's a real thing, and you can even find if you just do a Google, you'll find a couple of historic Google search of like journal articles and the like that
Okay,
that have alluded to this. Um, and I'll give you one more technological example too, just because I like to geek out about this. Is um, the book did this to us as well, the mass-produced book.
sure.
So the mass-produced book changed us, and it's not always a plus or all minus, but there's this amazing reference. I believe that it's to Augustine when one of his contemporaries was writing about him, and this is pre-mass-produced book. This is just when books are starting to be used more, and we're moving kind of from oral to written tradition around that time, fourth century, right?
Yeah,
Um, and they are in awe about how Augustine prayed without moving his mouth. Um, because and what that seems to propose is that the common practice was to pray out loud,
yeah, right.
and that the increased accessibility of a book taught us to think in our minds and to use less kind of verbalizing of our thoughts. And that's a massive shift in the human experience, and
Yeah,
that we all kind of live with today. And so today, when we see someone who verbalizes out loud and they just talk a lot because they talk by thinking, that may well have been the standard way of thinking for most people at certain times in American or in human civilization. Sorry, I know I went off a little bit, but all
that's
this
right.
to say that AI is the same thing. We have to be thoughtful, prayerful, deliberate in how we use it, but not to disregard it. I like to play the role of a Ludvicate. I'm a Luddite where I'm a critic, an intense critic, and I'm going to be an advocate at the same time and let that little civil war
Yeah.
fester inside of me.
So I have some Facebook friends that I don't actually like very much, but I keep them on because they're they they love technology so much. I mean, I can't even tell you how much they love technology, and so I just like I keep them on because I want to see what they say and how they say it and whatnot. And I keep waiting for the world to like erupt on them and destroy their whole paradigm. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing what their reaction when that happens. But in my mind, like what we've described as technology is like, and you and I have had lots of conversations about technology over the decades, actually. But like, I would even include things as technology, like this paradigm of where a business will only hire somebody with a degree. I would
Yes.
consider that a technology,
Yep.
and that has ramifications as well, like on everything. So we are 30 minutes past my normal time. Not that that's a problem for me, but I want to be sensitive to your time, and so I'll just say I'll finish this thought and then turn it over to you. That um, you and I have both kind of referenced the fact that we're Christians in all this, and the people that I talk to about the ones that I the Facebook friends I don't really like, those guys are actually Christians, and I feel like that the world is going to go in one direction. It's going to go in whatever direction it wants. But as Christians, we have an obligation to make sure that whether it's in the educational sphere, the commercial sphere, the economic sphere, the political sphere, when it comes to technologies, we go with what Paul says everything's permissible, but not everything's beneficial. And I will be a slave to nothing. I will be the master. And that requires so much work intellectually and spiritually that I feel like a lot of people are just not willing to do it. And the people who are will pay a price. Whether, they'll be ostracized, or even monetarily, like they're not going to get the job that they might have wanted because they're like, well, I'm just not going to give 5 years to a degree program, for example, just for example, you know. So I'll give you the last word on that, and I can tell we're going to have to come back and talk about it again. So go
Sure.
ahead and close her up.
No, I think that that's really intriguing. I think there's a possibility that you're right. Um, I think it's going to be a mixed bag. I think
Wait,
that
wait. Right about what?
I think this idea that those who kind of choose the road less traveled, as you were describing, may have some consequences that aren't so positive in society. But I think at the same time, there are going to be some individuals. Um, we're still human beings, and we have shared problems and challenges and cravings and needs. This is kind of leaning into our Christian theology. There's a passage in Proverbs 19, I think it's 19:22. It says, "What a man desires is unfailing love, better to be poor than a liar." And what and that suggests that every human being that I've ever met and never met has a common yearning for love, not just any kind of love, but unfailing love, a kind of unconditional love. And as a Christian, I believe that there's only one who's capable of providing that kind of love in the world. It's God in Christ. And um, and and so much of human history, as C.S. Lewis talks about, is man sort of trying to fill this God-shaped vacuum in the heart. And as who was it? Um, it was Anselm that wrote about that. Anselm used a similar quote, but um, Pascal, I think it was. Anyway, about the vacuum. Was that Pascal who used the God-shaped vacuum?
I'm trying to use Grok here to to answer that, but it's so fixated on is Dr. Bull wrong?
Um, Oh, so anyway, all of this to say that's a really that's there's a deep yearning for this kind of unfailing love, and I believe that there's always going to be a sense of dissatisfaction with anything other than that. Like I think that's part of the theological truth there. We also know, for example, in the scriptures, it says that God's put eternity in our hearts, but no one can grasp it, which is why people are always kind of constantly looking for some way of manufacturing a notion of eternity, even to the point of, can I upload my consciousness into the internet and live there forever, or other things like that. It's a it's a deeply human kind of thing to ask those questions of life after death and all, because we're wired with this yearning for eternity, and
Yeah,
created for it. Um, and so similarly, as we talked before, I think there are these deeply fundamental things that um, it's going to feel off. Um, that I don't think we can be totally turned into robots. Like there's going to be evidence that's lingering that something's not right.
right.
And so my hope, maybe I'm being overly optimistic. My hope is that even while someone may suffer some negative consequences for um, being more contrarian on some of these things, that pointing people to truth and beauty and goodness, um, is I don't think that's ever going to go out of vogue. It's not go out of fashion. Um, and there are going to be people that resonate. It's why music. I've become in my later years now. I play music every day. I'm not a great musician, but I play it every day, and I believe that it's there's something really beautiful about just harmony and the way that words and music come together to tell a story or something like that. Can AI generate it? Yeah, and it's actually getting kind of good at some genres. Country songs is just three chords and a three chord. What is it? Three chords and the truth, as they say. Um, so. Um, uh, but there's still something really distinctly human about going to a local coffee shop or
Right.
venue and hearing someone play live.
Yeah.
um, and similarly, so I'm still I have a little, even though we're in a fallen world and we're going to make some really bad decisions and people are going to suffer for them, I'm still hopeful that people who lean into the human side of things, that they're going to have something of value to offer that others will see. Maybe maybe they'll have some consequences along the way too. But I think there's something that people will be drawn to.
All right. Well, I would love to talk even more about it, but we again want to be sensitive and respectful of your time. So, can we agree together that you'll come back?
Yeah, sounds good. We have to pick a really interesting topic. Maybe we can. Uh, I'd love to. I'm not a musician, so it'd be really fun to for both. I don't think you're like a formal. I know you dabble with music or guitar at
Absolutely.
points and all. I know you wrote a song for your wedding. I remember
That's
that
right.
for your wife. But that might be a fun way to get at some of these themes, but in a very different way. Is to pick something like something related to music and its role and
So, in 2 weeks, we're gonna have a guy on to play guitar. That's
oh,
that's
fun.
that's the whole thing. And he's never gonna watch this, but he's an atheist,
Uh-huh.
and I'm gonna ambush him about like why does a materialist like resonate so much with the beauty of sound? Like, and I'm looking forward to that. So it's funny that you're saying those things because like I'm already lined it up. Like I'm like pounced, ready to go on almost exactly that. So I'll make sure that you're aware of that when we do that.
Yeah, that sounds great. No, I'd be happy to come on and we can pick a topic and explore it and just have a good
Yep,
conversation. This is, I guess, a contemporary version of hanging out and over a digital cup of coffee.
that's right.
And this is
Or
what we did in college, late
that's right.
night, staying up way too late in
Yep.
dorm rooms. Yep.
I know it's 8:41. It's too late, man. We gotta get to bed.
No, that's right.
All right. Well, if you just hang on for a minute, I'll close it up, and then we could just maybe chit chat real quick before things are done.
Sounds
So,
good.
all right, I will sign you off here. All right. Well, thanks for watching, folks. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the comments in the comment section. I really appreciate it. Something that we didn't really have a chance to come around to that wish that we did. I really appreciated Dr. Bowles' statements about about how how human it is uh, to have certain kinds of relationships and connections with things that we can duplicate through other mechanisms. And to just go all the way back to the very beginning with Frederick Taylor. I told you at the beginning, if you watched, you can rewind it later if you weren't here, about how he had this idea that, well, let's see if I still have it here. In the past, man has been first. In the future, the system must be first. His idea was that society itself was like a thing unto itself, and it had the society was like a body that had its own rights and privileges, which included like destroying unnecessary cells. Well, of course, an unnecessary cell in that framework, according to the Nazis, was a human, right? And so, like, we have these big ideas that percolate through our society, and sometimes we don't give them the attention that we should. But and they end in bloodshed. It's kind of where I'm going with that. But I think by being conscientious and thoughtful about the things that we absorb, especially if you're a Christian viewer, which you're called to do this. You're not supposed to just take whatever the world throws at you and just accept it uncritically. So you should be on board, whatever this is, wherever it goes. Um, sorry, JB, I missed the reference to what that was. I'm just gonna kind of move on so I can close her up here real quick, I guess. Um, I think that all of our surroundings testify to the fact that we are we're not really made for this world in its current form, and we should take that seriously. And as evidence of something else, something that will give us meaning and purpose. And we should not find our meaning and purpose
in transient systems of any kind, whether it's corporate, educational, or the government. Our meaning and purpose will be found in something else. And even in our families, where most of us find meaning and purpose, ultimately, even that, even though that's closer to the heart of what I think God has made us to be, even that will let us down. But I'm going beyond a little bit. The point is that there is a God. We're not Him, but He created us to resonate with certain things, and we should never be a victim. We should never willingly subject ourselves to being a slave to the machine. Rage against the machine, and we'll just leave it there. But remember who your God and Maker is. So, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, buy all of our books, buy like 1,000 of our books. That would be even better. We're not asking for donations. We're just asking you to spread the word. We talk about deep things, things that are fun to listen to and talk about that don't get played on CNN. And that's it. I really appreciate you guys watching for tonight, but I'm going to wrap it up before we're here for another 15 minutes. So, God bless and good night.